Hey guys, Dr. Bodle here. I hope you're well, and thank you for joining me today as we cover 3 reasons why you should remove entire foods or entire food groups from your Hashimoto's diet plan. Now, I know that concept might sound alarming to some, but hang with me as we work through some of the reasoning, and if it makes sense, maybe it's something that you can apply to your own strategies to help you to make some additional improvements. But before we get started, I always try to make my videos, at least as much as I can, in a way where when it's first released, that information can be useful to someone, but it's also useful to someone who might be watching it 5 years down the road. And it's for that reason that I try to use research and concepts that are relatively well vetted. That way I don't wake up the next morning, something's changed, and I go, oh, well, that video wasn't worth much to us. But in addition to that, I also try to not include too many current events. But today I wanted to break that rule and note that my channel has reached 10,000 subscribers. This was a number that I never set out to achieve. I'm totally blown away by it, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for the support. As I've mentioned before, my job is not to be a YouTuber, but I'm hopeful that I can use the platform to provide you with information that can change the way that you live and change the way that you feel and function. Initially, the goal of the channel was to provide a reference point for my patients who are in my clinic, but I soon realized that there could be other people out there who would benefit from similar information. So I tried to change the way that I approached YouTube and present things in a way that could be useful to anyone. I remember thinking that when I got 100 subscribers that, I had really hit the big time, and it was a number at that point that I didn't expect either. And so now to see the channel grown as much as it has, I don't know necessarily if it should feel special or not, but it feels special to have all of you guys along with me for the ride. So thank you again. This channel has always been and will always be for you. And I hope you continue to watch and find the information useful, and we'll see where this thing takes us. But if you do want to keep on learning and supporting, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really does mean a lot to me, and I really do appreciate it. But let's get back to our topic of the day, which is why you should remove entire foods or food groups to help you to improve some of your Hashimoto's symptoms. Now, we've discussed before that the standard modern approach to nutrition often revolves around moderation. No food is good or bad as long as you don't overdo it. And therefore, when anyone suggests that you should completely avoid or restrict a certain food, well, most of the time you're met with a chorus of boos and jeers from the nutritional crowd. Of course, if you've watched me before, you know that I think it's very important that we choose strategies that fit you as an individual. And there are certain situations where restriction probably isn't the best choice for us. So if the idea of removing a food or an entire food group feels really stressful to you, and you think that it could either make your health or your eating habits worse, then the simple answer here is don't do it. But at the same time, be open to the idea that some people, especially people with complex health conditions like Hashimoto's, may benefit from that type of a strategy. So let's talk about those reasons. The first reason why you would want to consider removing a food or food group is to test your body's response to it. Because that idea of moderation and tracking our food based on the amount of food that we're eating has become so ingrained in us, people often forget that we can have individual responses to different types of foods, depending on how they fit with our gut and our immune system. And it's for this reason that I think the whole moderation concept has really done a disservice for people with autoimmune conditions. We've been taught that 100 calories of eggs is relatively the same to 100 calories of bread. 100 calories is 100 calories, right? But even when the amount of calories is exactly the same, the way that our body receives and interacts with different foods can be dramatically different depending on the food that we're interacting with and the sensitivity of our immune system. So as I've said before, for people with Hashimoto's, it's not always the amount of food that's the problem. Instead, it's the frequency of exposure. Sure, you might not be having a lot of bread, but you could be having a small amount on a relatively frequent basis. And because your particular immune system doesn't respond well to that bread, it's going to continue to irritate your system and therefore potentially perpetuate symptomatology. The example I always like to use is think of it like a cut on your hand. If you pick at that cut every single day, even though you're only picking a little bit, if you cause that cut to bleed, then the healing process has to start all over again. And far too often, people with Hashimoto's and autoimmune conditions are often unknowingly continuing to irritate and exacerbate their system. But as we know, when it comes to food, there's a lot of variables. And although some people will have immediate reactions to food, those are the easy ones to track, for a lot of people, it's more of a cumulative effect. Meaning that bread that you don't respond very well to, it might not cause you to have reflux and bloating right after eating it, but when you eat it for a few days in a row, there could be a clear increase in your fatigue, headaches, joint pain, brain fog, irritability, and sleep problems. But you might not recognize that because the connection isn't as direct as we always think it should be. Now, I always want people to have as much diversity in their diet as possible and as much flexibility. But at the same time, I know that people with Hashimoto's have a tendency to be more sensitive to certain types of foods. It's for this reason, and our goal of helping them to feel better, that I will recommend to people removing certain foods from their diet. No, this doesn't mean moderating the foods and eating those same foods less. It means complete removal for a period of weeks or months, after which we may reintroduce and determine what the reaction looks like, or some patients may choose to avoid that food for the long term because they don't like the way that it makes them feel. I'll link for you in the cards above one of my videos where I talk about what foods you should be on the lookout for. But the key here is that total removal allows us to reduce pressure and stress on our system. It allows us to make improvements and start feeling better. And it helps us to avoid that mild but frequent response that we might get from moderating our food. That way we can truly test what's working for us and what isn't. Reason number 2 why you might want to remove food or food groups from your diet is because those foods were never healthy in the first place. Michael Pollan once said, "Instead of food, we're eating edible food-like substances." And I always love that quote. But once again, the prevailing thought process is that all food is equal, and we should be able to indulge in whatever variety that we like. As you can probably guess, I disagree with this concept. And although I don't think food is the only problem, as we've increased the processing of food, as we've increased the variety at the grocery store, people have gotten less healthy, not more healthy. So even though large food companies will tell you that their product can still be healthy as long as it's consumed within the context of a balanced diet, I think that's more about their marketing and them hoping that you'll still buy their product, and there probably isn't much regard for your health. So is it really removing food from your diet when it maybe wasn't food in the first place? Again, some people argue yes, and they would say that you shouldn't do that. But I think we're all a little bit smarter than that, and we can tell that there's a difference between a Pop-Tart and a steak. And even though these aren't the most scientific ways to approach our diet, I do like to teach my patients the concept of if this isn't something that your grandparents would recognize on their plate, or if you can't cover up the ingredient list on the nutrition label with your thumb, then it probably isn't something that you should be eating, at least not on a regular basis. So are processed foods more convenient, more tasty to some? Absolutely. But I think removing these processed foods from your diet can only benefit you in the long run. And finally, reason number 3 why you should remove certain foods or food groups from your nutrition plan is that certain foods can trigger bad habits. Once again, this is most often going to revolve around processed foods, but I have seen some people have some bad habits around dairy products like cheese or even things like nut butters. When we eat any sort of food, there should be a normal internal mechanism that tells us when we've had enough. And again, food companies will say that food is food, and people should have better control of themselves to make sure that they don't overeat and harm their health. But what they don't tell us is that a lot of processed foods are designed in a way that they bypass those normal satiety mechanisms, meaning that there's a specific combination of flavors and textures, colors, and additives that makes it very hard, if not impossible, for us to determine when we've had enough. And more often than not, it can actually encourage us to continue eating. If we combine the hyperpalatability with the availability of foods, essentially, foods are available at any time during the year, and oftentimes we don't have to leave our house to get them, then we really have a recipe for disaster. I often think about things like Lay's chips, bet you can't just have one, or Pringles. Once you pop, you can't stop. With these kinds of foods and others like them, most of the time, people can't stop eating them until the bag, can, or cookie box is completely empty. And with the fact that we can easily order another round straight to our doorstep, this can put people in a really tough position. Now, I'd be fine with the concept of moderation if we were accepting the fact that all food is on an even footing. But like I said, what we're ignoring in that scenario is that the game is being rigged behind the scenes. These food scientists know exactly what is going to encourage you to keep eating. And they prey off normal physiology that 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 years ago was necessary to keep us alive, especially when food was scarce. Nowadays, for most people, food is not scarce. And the way that we interact with food is being distorted by this overabundance and over manipulation of these food products. Maybe you're one of those people who can have one cookie and be done. But for a lot of people, having a particular kind of food can be triggering for them, and it can spiral them down a bad path. So if moderation works for you, great. But just like someone who might be addicted to gambling, in those situations, we don't recommend that that person gambles, but just a little bit. We remove the temptation and have them focus on other, more constructive aspects of their lives. Hyper-processed food can be addictive in a similar way, and you need to be able to recognize which foods are very difficult for you to set aside once you start eating them, and which foods might contribute to you making other poor nutritional choices at large. Once we identify those foods or food groups, and that's going to be a little bit different for each person, my recommendation isn't to keep them around the house, have a little bit here or there. Instead, I think it's better for us to remove them entirely. But like I said at the beginning of the video, I know that this can be a touchy subject, but I wanted to address it because I think there's different ways that we can approach this problem. And if you haven't been presented with them before, you might not realize that it could be a potential solution for you. So feel free to provide any feedback, let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you have any questions, ask away. If you like this video but need more help with your nutrition and you're interested in working with me one-on-one, then you can always start that process by sending an email to contact@seattlethyroidhelp.com. I'll also link that for you in the description box. And once we receive your information, my staff will reach out, see if you're a good fit for a free consultation, and help you to get on the books. During the consultation, you and I will sit down, discuss your symptoms, discuss your health goals, and see if this is something that I can help you with. I always want to make sure that you're in the right spot, we can help you out, and that we can be a team moving forward. If you'd rather keep learning on your own, there's a lot of great resources for you. Of course, you can check out any of the other videos or playlists that I have on the channel. I have 2 free downloads that are listed in the description box, or you can follow me on social media where I post daily information and strategies to both Instagram and Facebook. But that's all for this one. Once again, thank you so much for all the support and for getting this channel to 10,000 subscribers. I truly couldn't have done it without you. If you do like this sort of stuff, if you've been enjoying the information, please remember to like and subscribe, and also ring the bell for new videos every Thursday. But my name is Dr. Bodle. I hope you guys have an excellent rest of your week, and I will see you in the next one.